and welcome to the Two Gals and a Mic podcast. I'm your host, Sue Kerber, and today I'm chatting with an Air Force veteran and proven leader who uses her skills and abilities to lead people and events. Tara Nyikos volunteers her time at Patrol Base Abbate as the Denver chapter lead. And when she's not leading veterans through extended backcountry fly fishing trips, Tara's tapping into her education to lead the program impact analysis project at Patrol Base Abbate. Tara, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much, Sue. It's great to be here.
Why don't we start with you telling us how you got into working with veterans?
It came from a need for myself to find that tribe and that sense of family again. After being out of the military for several years, I was originally doing some searches on different veteran organizations that took veterans outdoors, and that's how I found Patrol Base Abbate.
So, how long had you been out of the Air Force?
I've been out going on 13 years this year, and I've been a part of Patrol Base Abbate for about 3.5 years now.
Okay, so there was actually a long period of time when you didn't have that connection. So, how was that for you between transitioning out of the service and sort of looking for that connection in the civilian world?
It was really rough, to be honest. Trying to refine my purpose has been really difficult for me since getting out of the military. I tried to do my job I did in the military in the civilian sector for a couple years. And then I decided to go back to graduate school. I thought becoming a teacher would be another great way to serve. And I thought that would be my new purpose. However, I just didn't feel like that really fit my personality. And so I struggled for many, many years trying to figure out where's my purpose, where's my place. And I just felt the need to connect with other veterans. And since I've done so, it's just been such an amazing healing process for me. I've run the Denver chapter for PB Abate for over 3 years. I also helped get the fly fishing club up and running just about a year ago. And I'm also working on a data program for Patrol Base Abbate. So it really has given me a newfound purpose in life. And it just really feels like that's where I fit.
You went back to school and you went through a series of different programs. What type of teaching were you studying? And when did you realize that that wasn't maybe your forte?
So I decided to go back to grad school to get my master's in education. My idea was to teach at the high school level, like business education, because of my bachelor's degree in project management in my career in the Air Force doing construction management. Once I concluded my internship at a high school outside of Dallas, Fort Worth, I just decided it wasn't the right place for me. I mean, the environment just did not fit my personality at all. So once I decided teaching high school was probably not going to be where I fit in, I decided to continue my education and get a PhD in educational psychology with the idea or the goal that I would then teach at the university level. I finished my dissertation on March 25th of 2020. So that was like right when COVID kicked off. In fact, I was the first person to defend my dissertation via Zoom. I had applied at several universities and had several interviews and almost had a tenured position. But because of COVID, people quit hiring. I somehow ended up in the mountains and here in Colorado. Everything works out for a reason. I truly believe in that. And it's God's plan, not my plan. And I'm extremely grateful to be in Colorado.
We have to talk about how you went from North Texas to Black Hawk, Colorado, because it cannot be a straight linear path. You've gotten your PhD, you're talking about defending your dissertation over Zoom, and I'm cringing because I remember when I had to defend my thesis for my master's, and that was in front of, a panel of people. I can't even imagine doing it over Zoom, but I digress. How did you plug into Colorado?
In 2019, while I was working on my dissertation in North Texas, living in a camper because that's what a broke graduate student does, right? I didn't have a reason to stay in Texas, so I decided to pack up my truck and I bought a little camper. And my dog and we headed out on a 4-month road trip all over the United States. And I really wanted to visit Colorado because I'd never been here. So I reached out on this random Facebook group for free camping and posted, "Hey, I'm interested to go to Colorado. Does anybody have any cool free places to camp?" And this random guy comments, "Can you be more specific?" course, like I browse his Facebook profile, and wouldn't you know, we have a mutual friend with somebody that I was deployed with in Afghanistan on a remote airfield where there was only 30 US forces there. And so I'm like, well, how do you know, so and so? And this guy says, well, I was stationed with him at Shindan Airfield in Afghanistan. And I thought, this guy is creeping. Like, no way. So I creep his Facebook profile a little bit more. And wouldn't you know, there is a picture of us together on Christmas Eve on that random airfield in Afghanistan. So I said, you got to be kidding me. And at the same time, he kind of realized who I was. And he was like, what? That's just so crazy. So, of
Mhm.
course, he's like, hey, you can come crash on my property. So I spent 5 weeks on his property and fell in love with the mountains. So that's how I fell in love with the mountains in Colorado. In 2020, he invited me back to Colorado to hang out on his property. And we actually went to like this really cool off road rally. And that's where I met my current boyfriend. So when I met Scott, Scott said, well, if you're coming back through Colorado, you can feel free to stop by my house. I live in Blackhawk. Again, though, I was traveling that summer. I had my truck and my dog all packed up, and we were just road tripping. Like, I took my dog, we went to Yellowstone, we explored the Tetons, we went down into Salt Lake City, back through Colorado, and I called Scott up. I was like, hey, is that offer still open? Can I come crash at your house for a week? And he's like, yeah. So I came here for a week, and basically I never left.
So very serendipitous. I mean, it's really because you have this heart for adventure. I would also say that that's a very brave thing to do. You pack up your truck with yourself and your dog, and you go see what kind of adventures are to be had. I'm hearing a current theme in our conversation here, and that's the theme of outdoor and nature. I'm making this assumption that that's a really important aspect of your soul and your purpose.
Absolutely. And that's why once I spent a significant amount of time in Colorado up here on the mountain in the middle of the woods, I had no desire to even apply to go work at a university in a city. Like, I had no desire to do that.
And I can completely understand that where when you're in nature and you're exploring the outdoors, there's just this sense of calm and peace that you don't have when you're in the rush and the hustle and bustle of a larger city. So how did you do that, Tara? How did you find your purpose after you found your calm?
When I think of purpose, life purpose, to me, that means serving others. So, how can I serve others? I serve others today by volunteering and leading things with Patrol Base Abbate. I serve in our local community by working part time at our community center. I've led some fly rod building classes up here in our community. So that's how I find my purpose now. It's serving others. So how can you do that on small levels? How can you serve your family? You know, what can you do for your spouse today or your loved one today or your community members today? So serving others is how I find my purpose, and I find that in all kinds of avenues of life.
And I think it's not only finding your purpose, but something else that you just said really resonated about finding connection. Post COVID, I think people are coming back into this busy world that we all live in, still trying to find those deeper senses of place. And I know that you've said you feel like you found your family since you got involved with the organization, and that's been life changing. So, how do you find connections? How do you build those deep connections?
The first step is taking the first step. And I know a lot of veterans struggle with that, and me included. You have to put yourself out there first and foremost, because if you don't put yourself out there, you're not going to be able to find those connections and build those connections. So you got to be willing to be vulnerable and put yourself out there. And that's really hard to do at times, is to be vulnerable and to be who you are when society has all these ideas on like who you should be. I've had people say, well, you're not doing anything with your degree. Okay, so what? Just because you think that's what I should do, that doesn't mean like that's what I should do, right? So putting yourself out there, being vulnerable, being who you are, being true to yourself, and the right people will come to you. You know, those relationships will just naturally come, and you're not going to get along with everybody. You're not going to make connections with everybody that you might want to, but the few strong ones will come around.
So, how do you do that, especially as a woman? I think that being vulnerable can be really hard. How did you do it? How did you take that first step to get past the fear or whatever roadblocks, perceived or otherwise, that you might have and just say, you know what? I'm going to go do this and I'm going to be authentic and I'm going to step into who I am. Take it, leave it, love it. It's fine.
Yeah, it's not easy at all. And one thing I've struggled with too is, coming out of the military where I had an amazing career, numerous accolades and medals and achievements. Coming out of that and then feeling like almost a failure, but going back and just reminding myself just because that chapter of the military is over and behind me, it doesn't delete all those things in who I am, right? I just have to remind myself that I achieved those things because I was a good leader. I was dedicated to service. I did work hard to do all those things. So all these different personality traits, they still continue on in me, right? And so I just had to remind myself at times the story's not over. It's just shifting and bending and morphing in a different way, right?
That's something that I've said multiple times on this podcast because of my own experiences. Sometimes it's saying yes to that next right thing, even when that next right thing doesn't seem to make sense. So for you, it was saying, yeah, I'm going to get into my camper and my truck and take my dog and I'm going to go explore. And old acquaintance buddy of mine, yeah, I'm going to go hang out on your 5 acres in Colorado. You know what I mean? So just sort of leaning in to that intuitive yes is sometimes the breadcrumbs that we need to help us along the path. I have spent some time with you. You're pretty amazing. As a matter of fact, you used to do cowboy mounted shooting.
Yes.
You need to tell our listeners what this is all about because when you told me, I was absolutely enthralled.
I've rode horses since I was about 8 years old. I've had horses since I was in the sixth grade. Up until I moved to Colorado, I sold the two horses I had to move to Colorado, which was huge for me too, because being a Texas gal, that was my identity too. And I had to shed that part of my identity. So I've had horses my whole life and I've rode horses my whole life. And actually, when I was still on active duty I think it was like 2009, I was stationed at Holloman Air Force Base and I had my horses on base. And my farrier, the guy that would come out and trim my horse's hooves, said, "Hey, I do this sport. It's called cowboy mounted shooting, and I think you'd really like it. You should come out to practice and give it a try. It's a really cool equine sport. It's a timed event, kind of like barrel racing. The competitor has two single action revolvers, which means you have to pull the hammer back before you pull the trigger each and every time. So, two weapons, 5 rounds in each weapon. They're black powder blank, so there's no projectiles. So, it's relatively safe. And our targets are balloons. So, the black powder will pop a balloon up to about 30 feet. The timer starts. You shoot 5 balloons with one gun, you holster it, you draw your second gun, and you shoot the other 5 balloons. And you do it as fast as you can without missing because each miss is a 5-second penalty. So it's obviously a very adrenaline rush to do cowboy mounted shooting. I got into it in 2009 when I was on active duty, and then when I got out of the Air Force and moved back to Texas, I started training with one of the top cowboys in the United States, a really good friend of mine, Kurt Moore, and just really enjoyed it. I got to compete all over Texas. I even went to Las Vegas in 2016 and competed in Las Vegas. I did win a national championship one year in my division. It's really hard to ride a horse, run around on a horse and shoot as you're moving. And I have a little bit of a disability in my eyes where they don't work together, so I have no depth perception at all. So it's difficult, but it's super fun.
Let me ask a question about that because I need some clarity here. I'm envisioning you on this horse now. Are you seated in a saddle or are you sort of like in a standing position on the horse and are you going around an arena?
Yeah, so you're in an arena in a Western saddle. It's really similar to barrel racing if you've ever seen barrel racing. There's a ton of different patterns. There's like over 80 different patterns. So you never know what pattern you're going to get when you go to a competition until you get there. You usually typically run like 3 patterns a day. If it's a multi-day shoot, like a Saturday, Sunday shoot, you might run 5 or 6 patterns, but you don't know what pattern you're going to get till that morning. There's different poles, there's different barrels, there's what they call a gate, which is two cones that you have to run between. There's certain ways that you have to run each pattern, and you can get penalties if you don't run the pattern correctly. So my fastest time ever shooting clean, which means I shot all 10 targets, was about 11-second run. If you think about that, you have your first pistol, your first revolver drawn, one, you cross the timing line, and then as pull the hammer back, shoot, pull the hammer back, shoot 5 times. Put that gun in a holster, take out your second gun, and 5 more. So my fastest time was just over 11 seconds shooting all 10 targets. So that's bam, 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 bam. You're done. It can be that quick. It's pretty intense and it's pretty crazy.
I have personally spent some time with you on different shooting ranges for pistol and rifle and shotgun and that type of thing. This woman can shoot. She is amazing. And we know you fish. I want to come back to that, but you also hunt, right? Is that something that you do on a regular basis or?
Prior to my most recent trip a couple months ago, the only hunting I had ever done was waterfowl hunting. I had done a little bit of duck hunting in Texas, and I hunted in Arkansas for speckled belly geese. Other than that, I had never hunted in my life. Now, when I was a kid, my stepdad used to go deer hunting. So I would go with him, but I had to stay in my grandfather's house until I heard a gunshot. And then I could go look out the window. And if I saw my stepdad coming out of the deer stand, then I could go out to the field. So I was exposed to that when I was a kid, but never really any true hunting. So just a couple months ago, that was my first deer, right? So I'm ready to go hunt more. In fact, I've been asking people in my county and in my community and veteran buddies of mine out here. I'm like, okay, how do I get into this?
Tell us about that adventure, specifically going out that day and getting your first deer. So, for a little context before you do that, Tara and I actually met when we went on this hunting trip together. And for me, it was more of an adventure to go see the animals in their natural environment because even though I went to the ranges and I did all of the shooting and all of the preparatory work, I just could not pull the trigger. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. But I loved sitting out there every morning, watching the sunrise with my coffee and watching the animals come out and just seeing them do what they do. But you came back one day and you had a deer. So tell us about that.
Yeah, it was actually the first afternoon we went out to hunt. I'm super nervous because I've never rifle hunted before. I've never hunt big game before, and I'm pretty confident behind a weapon. I'm pretty confident behind a rifle. So we get out there in the deer stand, and the deer start coming in like right away. I was like flabbergasted, and I mean mostly like does and babies. And we had some bucks come in, and finally one came in that it was good enough to take. I was so nervous I was going to miss it. My adrenaline's pumping. As I pulled the rifle out and got it all set up, I could feel my heartbeat in my neck. I could feel the adrenaline rushing through my veins. But I got set up and I took the shot, and lo and behold, I hit the deer right exactly where I was supposed to hit the deer. So, shot was on point. And then the craziest thing happened. I shook so bad, like my hands were shaking, my arms were shaking. I was so excited, but nervous, but more excited. It was a crazy phenomenal feeling. He took 4 strides and he was down. That was that. But what a beautiful creature, what a beautiful animal. So thankful for that opportunity. And in fact, I made whitetail chili last night with some of the meat that we got. And I made whitetail Hungarian goulash because I'm Hungarian by background. So I made some Hungarian goulash with whitetail stew meat this week too, and it was phenomenal. So definitely appreciative of the experience and the nourishment to my body and soul all the way around on that experience.
Yeah, and I do want to mention that because from a conservation perspective, when we were invited to go on this trip, all of the animals that were harvested were for conservation purposes and they were used in their entirety. So there was no waste. And it was really, from my perspective, even as someone who doesn't hunt, although we all know I love to fish, it was beautiful to see people who were so conservation focused and so thoughtful, and to kind of see that circle of life in a very focused way.
I agree with you. Absolutely.
Well, speaking of fishing, I want to go back to what you're doing now because you did mention you do some rod building, and I've seen some of your rods. They're pretty amazing. And you're also helping lead veterans through extended backcountry overnight fly fishing trips, both in Colorado and in Montana. I'm curious to know, are there a lot of women that are going on these trips?
That's a difficult question because the answer is truly no. However, I will say I've been able to get some females into our group to go out fly fishing. We went to Montana last year because Patrol Base Abbate actually has some property in Thompson Falls, Montana. And so that's where we did our extended weekend trip last year, and we'll be doing it again this year. But generally speaking, no, there's not a good representation of females in fly fishing, which I hope to change.
Mhm.
I will tell you though that our trip to Montana last year, one gal had fly fished before, but it had been a long time. She had a blast. One of the women, though, she had never fished a day in her life. And I mean, not fished at all, not just not fly fish, not fished at all. And she was catching fish hand over fist, and she had the time of her life. And then I've seen her post since then, and she'll be, I don't know, in some ranch. She travels a lot too. She's very adventurous. She'll be in some random place and she'll go out fishing. Like it's amazing. She said she had the time of her life. So even if I'm able to draw women in and they don't do it as like a consistent hobby, even for them to come out and experience the camaraderie and just the peacefulness of fly fishing, that's a win-win in my book too.
100%. Absolutely. So, what's it been like for you to be in this active leadership position? Have you learned anything surprising about yourself?
It's been an interesting journey so far, especially having a hobby that's again, male dominated field, fly fishing. I have felt some feelings of inferiority of for sure, being around other guys, especially talented men that fly fish. But I think the biggest thing, the most incredible thing I've learned is that for the most part, they've all been super welcoming and just super happy that I'm there and super appreciative. When I first got into starting the fly fishing club with Patrol Base Abbate with, three other guys, is like, okay, well, I'm just gonna kind of sit back, and I'm new to fly fishing too. Like I grew up fishing with my dad, but not fly fishing. I just got into fly fishing last year, actually. It's been really interesting that the guys in the club that I run the organization with, they've just been so super cool about it. They've taught me a whole lot. They've been really welcoming. It's been an interesting journey, and it continues to be an interesting journey for sure. So I do feel like an equal part in the team in the fly fishing club leadership, which is amazing, right? When I went in originally feeling like, oh, one, I'm a girl, two, I don't know a lot about fly fishing. They let me do a lot of the leadership things. And so I feel like an equal partner on the team. Yeah, it's been a phenomenal experience. I'm really grateful for the guys that I know within the club that have been so welcoming and such.
Tara, I want to absolutely acknowledge what you just talked about because I too had a similar experience when I started in my own fly fishing journey. And I think this goes back to what we were just talking about. When you show up authentically with a feeling of purpose and you're like, this is who I am, this is where I'm currently at, it's all good, and you have that sense of humility, but curiosity. I'm telling you, amazing things can happen. I run in the veteran spaces as well, and more male veterans have brought me under their wing and helped me along the way. And there's just this tremendous sense of pride and purpose in getting more of my sisters and more of the female veteran community involved in these activities. Because as we talked about all the way back at the beginning, there is something so healing about the outdoors and nature.
I had these preconceived ideas like, oh, I'm going to go into this fly fishing deal with all these dudes and they're not going to welcome me in and they're just going to kind of like, turn their nose to me. But it hasn't been like that at all through the different veteran organizations that I've participated in fly fishing with. So many of these men have really taken me under their wing and showed me a lot of stuff. And I've learned so much and it's been an amazing experience. Put yourself out there, get out there and try it. It's probably not what you think it's gonna be.
And not as scary as you think it's going to be. It goes back to what we were talking about pushing yourself past that fear blocker so that you can really lean into the things that are fun and that make life worth living.
I think a lot of the guys that I've had interactions with fly fishing too, I think they really think it's cool. Oh, there's a female veteran and she's learning to fly fish. My original ideas or preconceived notions obviously were false. And that's something that I struggle with a lot, and a lot of other veterans probably do too, is we get these ideas in our heads, things are a certain way. And it's like, okay, stop it. You're your own worst enemy. Just get out there and do it, and then formulate your opinions based on your experience. Don't not do something because you think it's going to be a certain way. Like, just go do it and then figure out if it's good or bad.
And you may love it, or you know what? It may be one of those things where you're like, that was fun. I gave it a shot. Not happening again. And that's okay too, right? Because that's how you
That's
figured
okay
it out.
too. Yeah. What you
Yeah.
lose? Nothing.
So you're working right now to raise funds for this year's program. I know that you mentioned that you've got the program coming up in Thompson Falls, Montana. What is your vision for the 2024 program and beyond?
So last year we had about 16 veterans, I think is our number, that we flew in from all over the United States. We fly them in on Thursday and then they leave on Monday. Originally, the first couple years of PBA's existence, Patrol Base Abbate's existence, we were kind of like roughing it. Like, we were staying in tents with porta johns. If you have been to Patrol Base Abbate, we call it the Return to Base program. If you've ever been to the RTB prior to this past summer, you get a gold star on that one because it was rough, but it was fun. The river there, I think it's the Thompson River. We were catching so many fish. It was phenomenal. It was cool. Like, but this past summer, Patrol Base Abbate purchased a 60-acre property with this amazing lodge and these really cool bunkhouse buildings. The 2024 fly fishing RTB will be at the new property. We won't be roughing it, so it'll be really, really awesome. We can accommodate more people, but the thing is, when you're organizing fly fishing, especially wade, we probably won't go any more than 20 veterans on a trip just because it gets logistically really complicated. But hopefully, we'll have a little bit more female involvement in that trip. We have a lot of lessons we learned from last year, even though it was a huge success. The experiences that these veterans had is phenomenal, and it totally melts my heart. All the work and hard effort and all the volunteer hours that a bunch of us put in to see the participants' responses is just amazing. I can't even put it into words, the feelings that it puts on my heart. It was phenomenal.
But you don't get there unless you are able to overcome challenges and stay nimble and deal with adversity and all of these things, that you probably learned in the military and we learn as we continue on our journeys. What advice, your best advice for overcoming challenges?
To go with the flow. You just have to be flexible. I'm a very, very detail oriented person. I'm all about organization and structure and plans. When you're doing, well, anything in life, and especially organizing events like this for multiple veterans, you have to realize that your plans don't always go per plan, and you just have to be able and willing to adapt and overcome, just like we did in the military. So you just got to go with the flow and run from there.
So, one last question for you, Tara. When you look back on all of this, despite the divergent paths that probably created the foundation that you need for what you're doing now, what's the thing or things that you will be the most proud of?
Yeah, that's such a great question, right? We often think about legacy, right? What legacy are you leaving? Again, I'm going to go back to the idea of serving others. Probably my most proud moment is going to be, of course, my military career, because I got to do a lot of really cool things in really cool places with a lot of really cool people, but also my service now, serving other veterans and just being around other veterans is what I'm going to be super proud of. And I would hope that that would be my legacy, is like, she had a heart of service and she served others well. That's what I hope my legacy would be.
Tara, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and chat about all of the amazing work that you're doing. You're making a significant impact in so many lives, and it's wonderful to hear how just that little bit of courage can blossom into something so amazing. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Sue. It's been real fun. Thank you so much.
And listeners, if you'd like to find out more about Patrol Base Abbate or Tara's vision for this coming year, I've put the links in the show notes so you can take a look at those. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of these awesome stories. I'll see you next week for another edition of Two Gals and a Mic.